Ask the CEO to lunch. Go on. We dare you." Tarek Bello said it across the operations floor at 5:30 in the morning, grinning like a man who had waited all week for the joke to land. The night crew laughed. They always laughed at that one. It was the safest joke in the building, because everybody knew that Dean Marlowe would never in 100 years walk up to the 40th floor and knock on the glass office where Elise Danforth ran a company worth billions. Dean did not laugh. He wiped his hands on the gray rag that lived in his back pocket, and he looked up at the ceiling as if he could see straight through 40 floors of concrete to the woman up there. Then he set his multimeter down on the workbench, very gently, the way a man sets down a thing he intends to come back for. The laughing stopped when he started walking toward the elevator. "He's not actually doing it," someone whispered. And the whisper had an edge of panic in it, because the crew had never once considered what they would do if he called their bluff. He rode up alone in his work shirt, the one with his first name stitched over the pocket and nothing else. The elevator opened onto a carpet so quiet he could hear his own boots. He crossed it. He stopped at the glass wall of the corner office, where Elise Danforth stood mid-sentence between two directors in very good suits, and he knocked once with a single knuckle. The whole floor turned to look. Before you keep going, guess whether the man in the work shirt is about to embarrass himself in front of the most powerful people in the building, or whether he is about to change both their lives. Stay with this one until the end, because the answer is not the one the two directors were expecting. 6 weeks earlier, none of them would have believed it either. To understand how Dean Marlowe ended up knocking on that glass, you have to go down instead of up. You have to go beneath the marble lobby and the trading floors and the war rooms, down to the level that does not appear on the elevator directory, where the company kept the thing it could not run a single hour without: the data hall. At 5 in the morning, it hummed like a held note. Rows of black cabinets stood in cold aisles, their fans breathing in a rhythm so steady you stopped hearing it after a while, the way you stop hearing your own heartbeat. Dean walked the hot aisle with a paper cup of coffee going cold in his hand, and he read the room by sound. He could tell you which cooling unit was working harder than it should before any gauge on the wall admitted it. He could hear a bearing starting to fail 3 days before it failed. The company measured itself in billions of dollars. It ran quietly on a man who listened to fans. Nobody upstairs knew his name. That was not a complaint. Dean had made a kind of peace with it a long time ago, the way a lighthouse keeper makes peace with the fact that the ships do not write letters. He kept the lights on, the ships got where they were going. That was the arrangement, and it had suited him fine for years, because it came with the only thing he truly needed: steady hours. At home there was a drawing taped to the refrigerator, a crayon rocket with too many windows, signed in the careful block letters of a boy who had recently learned that his name would fit if he made it small enough. There was a school calendar on the wall with a bell drawn at 3 o'clock every weekday circled. There was a note under a magnet in a woman's handwriting, 4 years old now, that said only "buy milk," and Dean had never once taken it down. His whole life bent around a third-grade bell. Milo was 8. In the mornings, Dean walked the hot aisle and listened to a building breathe. And at 10 to 3, he clocked out and stood at a chain-link fence with the other parents and waited for a boy with a backpack too big for him to come running out. He had turned down 2 promotions to keep that arrangement. He would have turned down 20. He was refilling his coffee at the little machine by the log room when he heard the stairwell door, and he knew before he turned around who it would be, because there was only one person in the entire company who took the stairs down to the operations floor at dawn. You are going to wear a path in that floor, Elise Danforth said. She stood in the doorway in a coat that probably cost more than Dean's car, holding her own paper cup, and she did not look like the woman in the annual report. She looked tired in an ordinary way, the way people look when they have been carrying something heavy up a long flight of stairs. "Somebody has to," Dean said. "The building doesn't walk itself." She had started coming down about 4 months earlier. He had never asked why. He had a guess, and his guess was that the 40th floor was full of people who wanted something from her, and the operations floor was full of machines that did not want anything at all, and that somewhere in between there was one man with a coffee who talked to her like she was a person and not a lever. He did not say any of that. He just poured her a fresh cup when hers went cold, because that was the neighborly thing to do, and Elise Danforth had discovered, to her own quiet astonishment, that she looked forward to it. "What is it doing today?" she asked, tilting her head toward the cabinets, as if the whole hall were a single animal. "Running warm on the east side, nothing serious. I'll rebalance it before the traders show up and start yelling about their screens." He almost smiled. "They think the internet lives in a cloud. It lives in a cold room in the basement, and the cold room is having a Monday." She laughed, and it surprised her, the way it always did down there. They stood in the hum for a while, 2 cups of coffee on a workbench between them, and neither one of them was in a hurry to leave. That was the thing about the operations floor. Time moved differently in a room built to never stop. You could not understand Dean Marlowe from the surface of him. You had to reach back. In the year 2019, on a night in August, the whole eastern grid stuttered, and the building's main power failed over to backup. And then the backup did something it was never supposed to do, and for 11 minutes the data hall began to cook. Alarms everywhere. The kind of failure that ends companies, wipes trades, makes the morning papers. Dean had been 31 years old, second on the night shift, and the man who was supposed to be in charge had frozen at his desk with his hands flat on the surface like a man trying to hold down a table in a storm. Dean had not frozen. He had walked the aisles in the dark with a flashlight in his teeth and improvised a way to shed load and force the cooling back online, cabinet by cabinet, until the note came back into the room, the held note, the hum. By sunrise, the building had never officially gone down, and almost no one ever knew how close it had come. Afterward, Dean sat down and wrote it all up, not a memo, a book, step by step in plain language, everything he had done and everything he had learned, so that the next person who stood in a dark hall at 3 a.m. would not have to be a hero to save the company. He called it the Recovery Runbook. He handed it to the department. And when it came back, printed and bound and adopted as official procedure, it had the department's name on the cover and no author on the inside. He let it go. He had a 2-year-old at home, and a wife who was starting to get tired in a way that did not go away with sleep. Rachel died in the fall of 2021. Milo was 3. Dean was 33. There is no clean way to say what a thing like that does to a man, so the narrator will not try to dress it up. It broke him. He kept getting up. He kept the boy fed and clothed and read to. He stopped chasing anything that would take him out of the house past 3 o'clock, and he never chased anything again, because he had learned the hard way exactly how much of a life you get, and he had decided to spend his in a kitchen and at a fence and in a cold room that hummed. There was one other person who knew whose hands had actually written the runbook. Bernie Tillman had been running the night shift longer than some of the cabinets had existed. He was 62, with reading glasses pushed up into white hair, and a habit of writing everything down by hand in logbooks that he kept in a locked cabinet in the back. Because, as he liked to say, machines forget and paper does not. He had been standing beside Dean on the night of the outage. He had watched the department put its name on Dean's work, and he had said nothing at the time, and it had bothered him for 7 years. "You ever going to put your name on that book?" Bernie asked him once over the log room table. "Nobody reads the cover," Dean said. "They read the pages. The pages are right. That's the part that matters." Bernie had grunted and written something in his log, and what he had written was, "He does not know what he is worth," and he had underlined it twice. That was the man the crew dared to ask the CEO to lunch. And for a while, that was all it was. A dare, a joke, the safest joke in the building. Then, in the second week of June, two things happened almost on the same day, and together they knocked the whole quiet arrangement off its shelf. The first was a memo. It arrived in every inbox with the words, "Operational Excellence" in the subject line, which is the kind of phrase that has never once in the history of business meant good news for the people reading it. Dean read it standing up at the workbench with the hum going on around him. The company would be modernizing its infrastructure. A vendor partner would be brought in to manage the physical plant. The transition would be seamless. The building, the memo promised, in a sentence that made Bernie put down his glasses, would essentially run itself. The man whose name was on the bottom of the memo was Chase Kellerman, the chief technology officer, who had joined the company 2 years earlier, wore very white shirts, and had never once, to Dean's knowledge, been down to the operations floor at any hour, dawn or otherwise. "Run itself," Bernie said. "In 40 years, I have never met a building that ran itself. I have met a lot of buildings that ran on some poor soul nobody thanked." The crew was quieter than Dean had ever heard them. Tariq did not make a single joke all shift. Everybody on that floor knew what a vendor transition meant. It meant that in 90 days, the men and women who had kept the lights on for years would be walked to the lobby with their tools in a box, and a rotating crew of contractors who had never heard the building breathe would be handed the keys to the one room the company could not survive losing. That was the first thing. The second thing was that Dean, watching his crew go silent under the fluorescent lights, thinking about a boy at a fence and a note under a magnet, felt something he had not let himself feel in a long time. Not anger. He did not do anger anymore. It was closer to a decision that had not finished forming yet. And on his way out that morning, at 10 to 3, he did not go straight to the elevator. He looked up at the ceiling. 40 floors. He came back the next dawn, and Tariq, trying to put the color back in the room, reached for the oldest joke he had. "Ask the CEO to lunch. Go on. We dare you." And Dean, for reasons he could not have explained even to himself, set down his multimeter. Now. Guess what he says to her when he gets up there. Guess whether either one of them says a single word about the memo, about the vendor, about the 90 days ticking down under both their feet. Keep that answer in mind, because what actually happened in that glass office is not what the two directors thought was happening. What happened was this. Dean knocked. Elise looked up. She told the two directors in a voice that did not leave the room for discussion that they would have to wait. They filed out past Dean with the expressions of men walking past a car accident, and then it was just the two of them and a wall of glass and the whole city spread out 40 floors below. "There is a memo," Dean said. "There is," Elise said carefully. "I did not come up here about the memo." He turned his cap in his hands. "The crew dared me to ask you to lunch. They have been daring me for about 4 months. I always let it go because it is a joke, and because you and I am a man in a basement. But I figured if the building is only going to run itself for the next 90 days, I might as well stop letting the good jokes go." For a moment, Elise Danforth, who negotiated with governments, did not have anything to say. "There is a diner 2 blocks from my son's school," Dean went on. "The coffee is bad and the pie is very good. 12 o'clock, you do not have to. I will not bring it up again either way." And then he put his cap back on and left, because he had learned a long time ago that the kindest thing you can do after asking for something is to give the other person room to breathe. She came. She came in the same coat, and she slid into a cracked vinyl booth across from a man in a work shirt. And she ordered the pie because he had promised her the pie. And for 1 hour, Elise Danforth was not the CEO of anything. She was a woman named Elise having lunch with a man named Dean. And the strangest part, the part that stayed with her all afternoon, was that in 1 full hour he never once asked her for anything. Not a favor, not a job for a friend, not a word about the memo. He asked her whether she liked the pie. He told her a story about a trader who had once called the help desk to report that the internet was broken because he had unplugged his own monitor. He asked her, near the end, what she had wanted to be before she became what she was, and she had to think about it for a long time, which told her something she did not enjoy learning. She told him one true thing, near the end, that she had not planned to tell anyone. She said that when she took the top job, her father had called to congratulate her, and that he had died before the year was out, and that some mornings she came down 40 flights of stairs because it was the only place in the building where nobody looked at her and saw a decision they wanted made. Dean did not try to fix it. He did not offer advice. He just refilled her cup and said that the operations floor would keep the light on for her as long as she wanted to use it. And something about the plainness of that, the way he offered a basement like other men offer the moon, made her laugh and then, briefly, not laugh at all. When the check came, he paid it before she could reach for her bag, $4 and some change for 2 coffees and 2 slices of pie. And he did it so quietly and so completely that she understood he would have been embarrassed to do it any other way. On the paper napkin, at some point, Dean had drawn a small rocket with too many windows, absently, the way you doodle. When he got up, he folded it and put it in his shirt pocket without thinking, because at home there was a boy who collected rockets, and Elise watched him do it and felt something turn over in her chest that she did not have a word for. That was the beginning of the thread. It is important that you hold on to it, because in the days that followed, someone was going to try very hard to cut it. Chase Kellerman did not hate Dean Marlowe. That would have required Chase to think about Dean Marlowe at all. What Chase had was a problem, and the problem was arithmetic. The vendor partner Chase had chosen for the transition had agreed to a management fee that was generous in a way that flowed, through 2 other companies and a consulting arrangement, quietly back toward Chase himself. It was the kind of arithmetic that only works if nobody looks closely, and the one thing standing in the way of nobody looking closely was a data hall full of experienced people who would notice, immediately, that the vendor's plan was cheaper because it was worse. Specifically, the vendor intended to run the cooling on fewer units than the building needed on a hot day, because units are expensive, and the summer heat was still 6 weeks off. And by the time the first real heat wave came, the transition would be signed, and the money would be spent, and it would be somebody else's emergency. Dean saw it on the 2nd page of the vendor's technical proposal, the way you see a misspelled word in a headline. This plan will cook the east side the first day it hits 95 degrees outside, he told Chase in a conference room, keeping his voice as level as he kept everything. You are taking out 1/3 of the cooling to save money on a spreadsheet. I cannot put my name on this. It is not safe. Chase smiled the way men smile when they have already decided how a conversation is going to end. Then we will find a name that will, he said. Here is where the story tightened, and here is where a young man you have not met yet becomes important. Devin Alcaraz was 24. He had been on the crew for 8 months. He had a baby at home who was 9 weeks old and a probationary employment status that would convert to permanent in exactly 3 weeks. And he was, in Chase Kellerman's eyes, the most useful kind of person in the world, which is a frightened one. 2 days after the conference room, a cooling unit on the east side failed. It did not fail on its own. Someone had adjusted a set point it should never have been near, and by the time the alarm sounded, the incident looked, on paper, like exactly the kind of failure a modern vendor would have prevented. And the incident report that Chase's office generated named the technician responsible for that zone, at that hour: Dean Marlowe. Except Dean had not been in the building. He had been at a chain-link fence at 10 to 3, and then at a kitchen table helping a boy with a worksheet about the letter Q, and the badge readers knew it, and the logbooks knew it, and Chase knew it too, which is why the report needed one more thing to be believed. It needed a witness signature from someone on the floor. They gave the form to Devon. They said, "If I do not sign it, I am the one they cut when the transition comes," Devon told Dean 3 days later, in the log room, in a voice that had not stopped shaking since he had done it. His hands were flat on the table. Dean recognized the posture. He had seen it once before, on a man frozen in a dark hall in 2019. Fear does the same thing to everybody. It makes them want to hold down the table. "I have a baby," Devon said. "I have 3 weeks left on probation. I did not know what else to do." Dean did not raise his voice. He had never once, in his whole life, found that raising his voice made a frightened person braver. "You were scared," Dean said. "I am not going to yell at a scared man, but I need you to understand what the paper says. The paper says I cooked the east side from a fence outside my son's school. The badge readers say I was not here. Those 2 things cannot both be true, and only one of them is on a form with your name at the bottom." Devon put his face in his hands. That night, Dean did not go home right away. He sat in the log room with Bernie Tillman and a locked cabinet full of 40 years of the truth written down by hand. "They put your name on it," Bernie said. It was not a question. He had already gone to the cabinet. "They did. You going to sign their vendor plan to make it go away?" "No," Dean said. "That plan will hurt people the first hot day. I am not putting my name on something that fails on purpose. Not to save my own job, not for anything." Bernie looked at him over the reading glasses for a long moment, and then he did something Dean had never seen him do. He smiled. "Machines do not lie for anybody," Bernie said, laying the logbooks on the table one by one. "That is why nobody down here gets thanked. And that, son, is about to be the most useful thing in this building. The badge records, the system logs, the immutable ones, the ones that write themselves and cannot be edited without leaving a scar. The maintenance timeline, the set point change, with a timestamp and a badge number attached to it, and the badge number was not Dean's. And, folded into a decade of Bernie's handwriting, the original draft of the recovery runbook, in Dean's hand, dated the week after the 2019 outage, with his name on the first page where the company had later removed it. Dean told Elise none of it as leverage. That is the part that mattered to her later, when she understood it. He caught her at dawn by the coffee machine, and he told her, plainly, that he would not endorse the vendor plan, and that he expected to be blamed for a failure he had not caused, and that he was telling her only because she had bought him pie, and it seemed dishonest not to. He asked her for nothing. He did not ask her to save him. He did not ask her to look at the logs. He just did not want her to hear a lie from Chase without having heard the truth from him first. "Why are you not asking me to fix this?" she said. There was something raw under the question. "You know who I am. One word from you, and I would have the whole thing pulled apart by tonight. Why are you not using it?" "Because then it would be a favor," Dean said, "and you have enough people who only talk to you because of what you can do for them. I did not buy you pie to become one of them." Elise Danforth stood in the hum of the data hall and looked at a man who wanted nothing from her, and understood that it was the most disorienting thing that had happened to her in years, and possibly the reason she kept taking the stairs. She pulled the logs herself. She did not need him to hand them over. She was the CEO. She had access to everything, and once she knew where to look, the truth was not hidden at all. It had been sitting in plain sight the entire time, written down by machines that did not know how to lie, and an old man who did not know how to stop writing things down. The board met on a Thursday in the middle of July to approve the transition. Chase Kellerman presented it beautifully. He always did. He spoke about modernization and efficiency and seamless partnership, and he put the incident up on the screen as the centerpiece, the proof that the current arrangement was fragile and human and prone to exactly the kind of error a professional vendor would eliminate. He said the technician responsible was no longer a fit for the modernized operation. He did not say the technician's name. He did not need to. It was on the slide. Would you have trusted the report or the man? The board had a report on a screen and a memo full of confident words. Keep your answer ready, because the room was about to get one more thing to weigh it against. Elise let him finish. That was the thing about Elise Danforth that people underestimated. She let people finish. Then she asked Bernie Tillman to come in, and Bernie came in with his logbooks and his reading glasses, and beside him came the plain, immutable record that the company's own systems had written about itself. The badged timeline that put Dean outside the building, at a school, at the exact minute of the failure. The set point change, time-stamped, tied to a badge that was not Dean's, and had, in fact, badged into the building through a side entrance under Chase's authorization. And, last, held up quietly for the room to see, the original run book. The one every person in that room had been trained on, in Dean Marlowe's handwriting, with his name on the first page. The man they had been told to erase was the reason the building had never gone dark twice. The room changed the way a room changes when the temperature drops. One director set down his pen. Another turned in his chair to look at the slide again, at the confident sentence about a building that would run itself, and you could watch the sentence stop meaning anything on his face. A woman near the end of the table asked quietly how long the recovery procedure had been in use, and Bernie told her 7 years, and she asked who had written it. And Bernie said the name out loud, and it was the first time in 7 years that anyone in a room with that much money in it had heard it. There is also, Elise said, in the same even voice she used for everything, the matter of the vendor's management fee and where a portion of it was arranged to go. She let that sit. Legal has the arrangement. I will not narrate it. The documents are clear enough. Lionel Krauss, who had chaired that board for 11 years and had seen a great many men try a great many things, took off his own glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. I think we have heard enough, he said. The vote on the transition is 7-1 against. And Mr. Kellerman, security is waiting in the hall. They will see you to your car. There was no shouting. There is rarely shouting when it truly ends. Chase Kellerman gathered his very white shirt cuffs and walked out between two people in blazers, and the door closed behind him, and the story simply stopped following him. He does not come back into it. Some men earn a reckoning and then are not worth another sentence, and he was one of them. What the story followed instead was a frightened young man. Devin Alcaraz had spent 2 weeks certain that he had ruined a good man's life and would lose his own job regardless, which is the particular trap fear builds for you, where every door looks locked. He came to Elise's office on his own, before anyone asked him to, and he told the truth about the signature, all of it, the pressure and the probation and the 9-week-old baby, and he said he understood if they let him go. Dean was in the room. Elise had asked him to be. You were scared, Dean said again, and this time he crossed the room and put a hand on the young man's shoulder. Scared is not the same as bad. You came in here on your own, and you told the truth when the lie would have been easier. That is the whole job, Devon, not the cabinets. That. He squeezed once. Come back to work. Your probation is over. Bring me a picture of the baby. Devon Alcaraz cried, which is not a shameful thing for a tired young father to do, and then he laughed, and then he went back to work, and his employment converted to permanent that same week, with a note in his file that he would never see, in an old man's handwriting, that said, "This one will be good." He already knows how to be honest when it is hard. The vendor plan was scrapped. The on-site crew kept their jobs. The undersized cooling units never got installed, which was fortunate, because the first real heat wave came in early August, and the east side ran warm for 3 days, and Dean Marlowe walked the hot aisle with a cold coffee and listened to the building breathe and kept it from cooking, exactly the way he had for years, exactly the way no spreadsheet had ever been able to do. Being proven right is not the same as being whole. Dean knew the difference better than most. On the walk home from school that Friday, Milo asked him how work was, the way he always did, and Dean said it had been a good week and meant it, and the thing he was proudest of was not that the truth had come out. It was that his son had spent the whole hard month watching a father who did not bend, and had never once seen him afraid, because Dean had done all his being afraid quietly, after the boy was asleep, which is most of what fatherhood is. "Did you fix the building?" Milo asked. "The building fixes itself, apparently," Dean said. "Somebody sent a memo." Milo, who was 8 and did not get the joke, accepted this as fact, and Dean laughed all the way to the corner. Elise came down to the operations floor the next dawn, in her coat, with her own coffee, and stood in the hum and did not have a company to run for exactly the length of 1 cup. "I owe you an office," she said. "A real one, a title. You should be running critical facilities for the whole portfolio, not one building, and I have the paperwork to make it so." Dean poured her a fresh cup because hers had gone cold. "I have one condition," he said. "Name it." "There is a fence outside a school, 10 to 3 every weekday. I stand at it. Whatever the title is, the title stands at that fence at 10 to 3, or the title can find another man." Elise Danforth signed off on it before he had finished the sentence, and she wrote the school pickup into the roll in writing, which is the kind of thing that only sounds small if you have never had to fight for it. She met Milo properly a week later, at the diner with the bad coffee and the good pie, and Milo studied her for a while with the frank attention of a child, and then he slid the napkin dispenser toward her and asked if she wanted to see how you draw a rocket with the right number of windows, and Elise said yes, she very much did, and that was the verdict. Children do not care about titles or logs or votes of 7 to 1. They care whether you will draw the rocket. She drew the rocket. Milo declared it acceptable. The dared lunch became a standing Friday, the 3 of them, in a cracked vinyl booth. Bernie Tillman retired in the fall and handed Dean the oldest logbook off the top of the stack, the one from the year of the outage, and told him to keep writing things down because machines forget and paper does not. The recovery runbook was reissued that same season with a correction to the cover, and for the first time in 7 years there was a name on it, and the name was the right one. Dawn in the data hall. The building hummed like a held note. Dean walked the hot aisle with 2 paper cups of coffee, one for himself and one for the woman coming down the stairs, and he read the room by sound the way he always had. Somewhere upstairs a quarterly report described the company in billions of dollars, and it was an honest number as far as numbers go. But a quarterly report can measure a company in billions, and still not measure the one thing that keeps it alive, which is a man who listens to the fans at 5 in the morning. The building had never gone dark twice, not because it ran itself, because someone quiet had decided, a long time ago, that it never would, and had kept deciding it every single dawn, whether or not anybody ever knew his name. 2 cups on the workbench, steam rising off both of them, the light coming up.